Hi, I'm Jenny, and I'm going to give my Gram's eulogy. I decided to record this because it's kind of hard to hear through a mask, so I thought I'd give this a try. Elaine Opal Wirtz was born January 6, 1926, in Lindsay, Wisconsin, to Paul and Lillian Martin. She was the youngest of 6 kids. There was Stan, Pep, Doris, Dawn, Jim, and her. They lived above their general store. Elaine wrote several stories from her childhood and from reading the one about her dad's shenanigans on the 4th of July and about her mom's special pancakes on April Fools. It sounds like her parents were pretty fun people. One thing that stands out about her childhood is that she really loved chickens. Here's a little bit of one of her stories called Chicken Littlest. I asked if I could have one chick for my very own pet, and he said sure. After careful scrutinizing, I chose the littlest one, still without feathers on her back. I named her Queenie, Queen of the Barebacks. I called to her every day and fed her from my hand. She soon knew my call and scurried to meet me. I carried my chicken on my shoulder, on my wrist, or in my hand, and even on my handlebars of my bicycle. She would sit on my knee or go scratching in the grass for those tidbits chickens scratch for. We were buddies. Elaine's chicken had a heartwarming adventure, and it's worth reading the whole story. So look for her stories out on the tables at the reception today. During the Great Depression, her dad gave away the food from his store to people who couldn't afford it until his shelves were empty. When Elaine was 16, they moved to Oregon. On their way, they had 22 flat tires. They finally made it to Corvallis, Oregon, where her dad had a job on a big chicken farm. Elaine graduated from high school at the age of 17 and a half and then went to college at OSU. It was the era of World War II, and there were lots of soldiers to go out dancing with. She had a different date almost every night. She met and started dating a tall, handsome man named Dick. When Dick finished college, he went back home to New York, and then he realized it was a mistake to leave her. So he called and proposed to her on the phone. And she didn't say yes, she said when. And he said, anytime you say. He moved to Oregon, and Dick and Elaine got married on March 23, 1947. Dick got a job at Longview Fiber Company, and they participated in the baby boom by having 5 children. Randy, Todd, Alan, Polly, my mom, and Steve. The following memories I gathered from Polly, Uncle Randy, Uncle Todd, and my Aunt Kathy. The Wirtz family first lived on Harding Street until Polly was 5. Then Dick built a house on Spruce Street. It had a big backyard with a badminton court. The net was lowered to play paddle tennis with wooden paddles. Uncle Randy remembers chasing many balls down to the creek. They played in a sand pile, caught frogs in a slough, played basketball, croquet, and Annie over, which was difficult to throw the ball over 2 stories from the backyard. There was also train tracks in the back, and further down into the woods there were fruit trees and a tree house that got blown down in the Columbus Day storm. My mom remembers her mom often took them down to the lake with big bags of breadcrumbs to feed the ducks. Also, picking blackberries in their neighborhood and eating cobbler. Aunt Kathy reminded me of her and Steve's favorite dessert that Elaine made, Cheerio cream cheese pie. She didn't want to pit the cherries, so she tried to pick them in such a way that it would leave the pit on the tree. If there were any stubborn stones, they'd end up in the pie. The household rule was the person who got the most cherry pits on their plate at the end of dessert had to do the dishes. Elaine said she was confirmed at age 12. Confirmation is a sacrament admitting a baptized person to full participation in the church or to be strengthened and established in faith. Dick and Elaine grew up in different churches, and they both didn't like each other's style at church, so they ended up going to Longview Community Church. At some point, their church changed pastors, to somebody who was too soft-spoken, and Elaine couldn't hear him anymore, so she quit going. But my mom still wanted to go, so my gram would drive her to church and then pick her up every Sunday. Elaine was always driving her kids everywhere. She drove them to YMCA swim lessons, school swim team, softball, baseball, basketball, track. My mom says they all got to choose an instrument to play, and Uncle Randy says he was told that he had to play the clarinet because he had fat lips. And Uncle Todd said, yeah, that's what they told us. I guess it's a Wirtz family trait. So, all the kids, Randy, Todd, Polly, and Steve, all played the clarinet. And Alan was the only odd one who got to play the coronet, which is like a trumpet. My mom says she was constantly driving us to all our activities and feeding us in shifts. The Wirtz family was a gaming family. They played all kinds of games after dinner. Royal Rummy, 500 Rummy, Hearts, Estimate, That's It, and Checkers, to name a few. They were an outdoor adventuring family. Uncle Todd said there were 7 of them, all packed into a station wagon with their stuff. And there were no seatbelt laws back then. At Blue Lake, they caught about 50 bluegill fish, and they had to clean them all, and they were little bitty things. Mount Rainier was another favorite spot that they liked to camp and hike. My mom remembers Ohanapekosh and Alta Lake, where they swam, fished, fed camp robber birds, swatted mosquitoes, and her brother smashed yellow jackets while she cried because she was scared. They went to Fort Stevens, where Elaine made not only sand castles, but also sand cars for her kids to sit in and drive. They visited Dick's brothers in California. They hit parks like the Redwoods, Shasta, Yellowstone, the Grand Canyon, and Zion. When at home, Dick used to kiss Elaine before going downstairs, like when he went to work on his boats. He built an 8-foot sailboat called the Sabbath. He also built a bigger boat called the Wayfarer. Elaine and Dick joined a sailboat racing club. They competed in races on the Columbia River and Yale Lake, mostly with just them as a 2-man crew, but periodically Steve or the other kids would step in as their second. My Aunt Kathy says, the pair worked hard at navigating together, but we all belly laughed when we heard Graham relay when the wind took a shift and the sail sent her into the drink. It's a good thing it was her that went in and not Grandpa. She was known to have swum across the Columbia River a couple times. 3 of Dick and Elaine's kids got married. Their youngest, Steve, married Kathy, who had 3-year-old Rob. When he told his mom he proposed, Elaine was surprised, but then said, "Yay, I'm a grandma!" Steve and Kathy also had Carrie, Dane, Erica, and Jameson, whose middle name is Lane, in honor of the beloved Grandma Lane. Polly married Jim Hill, and they had Jenny, that's me, Travis, Corey, and Rex. Alan married Jean and had Aaron and Nathan. Sometime during the years of a growing batch of grandchildren, Dick and Elaine moved to the blue house on the corner of Cedar Lane. Their home continued to overflow with family, friends, food, music, games, and laughter. Dick's mom, Carol, gave them her kiln, and so Elaine did ceramics, clay modeling, and pottery. She also made macrame hangings for her pots. Elaine was a self-taught painter. She painted this self-portrait when she was 16 or 17 years old. A few years ago, she was the featured artist for a display gallery at the Longview Library. We all knew Elaine was a super artist, but she also enjoyed sewing and stitchery. Kathy loves to stitch too, but when she didn't have time to do it herself, she was always buying her some gorgeous pieces to stitch, especially when it was time for them to go snowbirding. Thank you, Aunt Kathy, for giving her that Santa Claus cross-stitch. And thank you for finishing putting all the grandbabies' names on Santa's list. That's a really special one. When Dick and Elaine reached retirement, they golfed and traveled a lot. From the early 90s until 2005, they left Longview in mid-January through late March and stayed in a little community called 29 Palms in California. They golfed and went to Joshua Tree National Park. Todd says he went and visited them there a couple times. Other people rolled up in their big fancy trailers, and there was Dick and Elaine in their Mini Winnie. They also went on lots of cruises, mostly in the Caribbean. Dick and Elaine were very involved in their grandkids' lives, and they not only went to watch concerts or other events, but they took their grandkids golfing, bowling, swimming, and to the county fair. My Gram had a lot of energy and enthusiasm, probably a bit more than I could keep up with. I remember her taking me and my brothers to Chuck E. Cheese every year almost, and there came a point when I felt like we were too old and it wasn't very cool to go anymore, but she didn't care. It was fun. I always felt like she was the youngest old person I ever knew. When we went to Grammy Elaine and Grandpa Dick's house, we never knocked on the door. We just walked right on in like it was our own house. We were hit with the smells of dinner and dessert and the noise of family cheering or booing and laughing at games, and then the constant din of a golf game or a sports game on the TV in the den. But usually the first thing to hit us was Gram's hi and a big enthusiastic hug. My Gram passed on to my mom and my mom to me some fun traditions of how to celebrate. For birthdays, we played musical chairs or various relay races involving spoons and eggs or water or costumes with funny wigs. We went to Lake Sacagawea almost every other 4th of July with them to watch the logging show and the fireworks. Thanksgiving was all sorts of deliciousness, but the best of all was Christmas. With extra anticipation, we walked right on into their house, and we were hit with the smells of turkey or ham, potatoes and rolls, cran apple pie, presents under the tree, noisy games, and the din of sports on the TV. The family celebrated Aunt Kathy's birthday, and sometimes we went to their church for Christmas Eve service, but usually we just stayed home and we sang carols. Or, for a special treat, we broke out the rusty old band instruments and attempted to play the carols. Uncle Todd said his lip lasted about 5 minutes. There was a lot of squeaking, squawking, honking, laughing, jingling bells, and you could barely hear the singing. But it was a lot of fun. We usually stayed the night, and then on Christmas morning we woke up to cinnamon rolls and stockings that had been filled by Santa in the night. And then we'd spend several hours opening gifts round robin style so everyone could see each gift and ooh or ah or ha ha ha. And then there was games and more food and more games. And don't forget the treats. Chocolate crinkle cookies, molasses cookies, sugar cookies, gingerbread cookies, nut balls, lemon bars, and fudge. The years went by and the grandkids grew up and got married and blessed Dick and Elaine with great-grandchildren. From Steve and Kathy's family, Carrie married Jason Gallagher, and they had Emily, Piper, Owen, Addison, and Quinn. Dane married Sarah, and they had Paige and Dylan. Erica married Brent Leah-Broughton, and they had Bryn, Lane, also named for Grandma Elaine, and Milo. Jameson married Megan, and they had Russell. From Polly and Jim's family, Jenny, that's me, married David, and we had Katie, Violet, and Bruce. Travis married Jenna, and they had Josiah and Charlie. And Corey married Ariane, and they have Hayden. Elaine was a very fun person, and she was always inviting people to join in the fun. She was playful and young all her life, and there was hardly ever a party that she would ever miss. At my parents' backyard barbecues, she was walking on wooden stilts in her 80s and playing egg toss in her 90s. When posing for family pictures, she didn't say cheese, she said whiskey. Elaine learned to play many songs on the piano, and she didn't learn them by reading music. She learned them by ear. Todd said, yeah, she was amazing like that. She could hear a song and then sit down at the piano and pick it out. Mostly in the key of E flat, according to my dad, the band teacher. And the games that they liked to play later in life were Mexican dominoes, bocce ball, and, Todd says, boggle. That and Scrabble were the big ones. He remembers the Boggle Wars. Every time he'd come down to visit her, he and his mom would play Boggle for hours. It was a lot of fun because they were pretty well matched and it was very competitive. She was also a good bridge player, and she was in bridge club for many years. About 10 years ago, Grandpa Dick passed away. Elaine continued on being mom, grandma, great-grandma. She came to birthday parties, holiday gatherings, events, and she kept playing piano, bridge, and many games. I'm wondering if the many years of games had an effect on the brightness of her mind. Randy says that sometime in these later years, she won the game-winning shot in caroms at least 3 times, and right towards the end, she whipped Polly and him at playing upwards. Randy also remembers a time when Elaine was to the point of using a walker, that he, Todd, and Polly took her up to Olympia to hike around the Deschutes River. And she pushed her walker on hard, bumpy gravel and trooped around the whole loop about a mile, and they had a hard time keeping up with her. When the pandemic hit, and when Gram was to the point of needing more care, instead of putting her in a care facility where no one was allowed to visit, Todd, Randy, and my parents decided to care for her themselves. And so they took on her care for several years, staying with her in her home until she passed. I am so grateful to all of them for all that they did in her remaining years. When my Gram passed away, I posted on Facebook a picture of her smiling and singing with us on her 94th birthday. And I wrote, "Dear Grammy Elaine, thank you for being so fun-loving and teaching us all how to celebrate and be young all your life. You will be missed. I love you, Jenny."